And discussions on a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinian territories will be a major topic at the UN gathering in New York today. The escalating violence in Gaza and Israeli plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank have prompted more and more countries to support Palestinian statehood. Britain, Canada, Australia, and Portugal became the latest nations to recognize a Palestinian state on Sunday, bringing the total to 151 of the 193 UN member states. France, Belgium, and Malta have announced they are likely to do so at the General Assembly today. But there are concerns the move may be little more than symbolic, with Israel's leaders vowing that a Palestinian state will never exist.
The idea of a two-state solution dates back to 1947, when the United Nations proposed partitioning the British Mandate of Palestine into two states, one Jewish, one Arab, marked here in red, with Jerusalem under international control. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan, the Arab leaders rejected it, and a war broke out, during which Israel declared independence in May 1948. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled from their homes. The war and its aftermath pushed the founding of any Palestinian state into the future. Escalating tensions over territorial disputes involving Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria led to the 6 Days War in 1967 and brought another 1 million Palestinians under Israeli occupation, along with the territories they claimed for the future state. In 1993, the Oslo Accords revived hopes. Israelis and Palestinians recognized each other and began building a framework for peace. The proposed territory for the Palestinians was much smaller than in 1947 and included Gaza and most of the occupied West Bank under a complex system of shared and divided control. But in the 3 decades since, the vision has been eroded by Palestinian uprisings and terror attacks and Israeli occupation, blockades, and oppression. Since the Hamas terror attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, followed by Israel's full-scale war in Gaza, for many in the region, peace looks more distant than ever. On the Palestinian side, a divide between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas, which still controls Gaza, has paralyzed governance, which is widely seen as corrupt and disconnected from the people. In Israel, the current government, the most right-wing in the country's history, rejects Palestinian statehood outright. Many politicians advocate annexing the occupied West Bank and further expanding Israel's settlements that fragment Palestinian land into isolated enclaves. And the settlements, now housing over 500,000 Israelis, are just one of the key open questions still to be resolved in any future solution. Others include Jerusalem and its status as a capital, Palestinian refugees and the right of return, the final borders and security arrangement, and of course, the future of Gaza, where the war keeps raging on.
And here with me is our Middle East analyst, Shani Rozanes, who filed that report. Again, Shani, a host of Western nations recognized Palestine as a state on Sunday. More countries to follow today in New York. Is this more than a symbolic gesture?
Well, first of all, symbolism matters a lot for Palestinians. That's one thing. But a lot mostly depends on what comes next. How far, will the European countries, which are the ones joining, including also Canada and Australia, how far will they go with this basically very strong message that they're trying to send to Israel? We are not willing to accept your policy and your actions in Gaza and what's happening, how you treat the Palestinians anymore. Behind this symbolism can also follow more sanctions and cutting trade ties and definitely anything connected to weapons supply. If that also follows, that could put Israel in a really, really big problem and then maybe bring to a substantial change. But if it stays on this level of recognition and symbolism and speeches, then for the Palestinians on the ground, they have already seen over 140 countries do the same act, and they stayed in the end with nothing. So it really remains to be seen in the next couple of weeks. Is this a beginning of a very strong wave of diplomatic and political effort by the world to bring substantial shift in Israeli policy, or is this just another yet again, lip service for the Palestinian cause.
A strong wave, you say. And how is Israel responding to these diplomatic moves?
Well, Netanyahu yesterday said very clearly there will not be a Palestinian state between the river Jordan to the west, to the sea, which is the Mediterranean, basically denying that. Also, of course, calling this a prize for Hamas. And this is a lot of criticism that we hear, even among other forces that are supporting the Palestinians, basically saying you should have conditioned it more in removal of Hamas. You need to have made clear, to those countries, you should have made a clearer connection of how a change of the Palestinian leadership itself is also part of this. But eventually, what will determine is the American support or backing of Israel. Netanyahu is going to be at the UN in New York at the end of this week. He's meeting with Donald Trump on Monday. And he had also said, my official sanctions, counter-moves to these actions will only be announced next week after the meeting in the White House on Monday with Donald Trump. It's going to be, he's looking to get American support mostly for annexation. That's what's on the table. But he's also considering maybe downgrading some of the diplomatic connections. That's also something that could backfire against Israel. Being isolated will work against Israel. So it's somewhat of an empty gun that Netanyahu is using, because also the Arab countries are saying if there's any move of annexation, the Abraham Accords could be, dismantled. Definitely Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, those who were considered to be more moderate or more willing to go, another step towards Israel will rescind this acceptance. Trump, interestingly enough, before meeting with Netanyahu, will also be meeting on Tuesday with leaders of the Arab world, of the Saudis, of the Emirates, and so on.
Your piece mentioned that there are clear stumbling blocks on the way to a two-state solution, even, we should add, if Israel agrees to this concept. So how realistic is it that we will see this anytime soon?
Well, I think very little, because the reality on the ground is that the Israeli government is the most right-wing it has ever been. There's no tendency for any compromise. There's no willingness to open any discussion on any of these issues. The fact is that for the 2 million people in Gaza that are under this terrible war for 2 years, nothing is going to change today or tomorrow or probably in the next week. Same for the 2 million Palestinians under occupation in the West Bank. And Israel, more than that, knowing and seeing the international pressure, has actually accelerated its actions in Gaza. We are seeing a new division that the Israeli military is sending into Gaza, pressing on even more aggressively.
DW's Shani Rozanes, as always, many thanks, Shani.
You're welcome.
To discuss this further, we're joined now by international human rights lawyer Nomi Bar-Yaacov from the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Appreciate you joining us, Nomi. How significant is this New York conference for Palestinian statehood?
Thank you, Michael, for having me on your show. I think it is a significant, momentous first step in a long, long process, which hopefully will lead to peace. And a lot of mechanisms have to be put in place in order to ensure that two states will thrive as sovereign, contiguous, independent states side by side. So it's a first step. And it really is a call for action, because it could go either way and it really needs to be implemented. The intention of all the states declaring Palestinian statehoods. Of course, Palestinians have a right to statehood. Yes, true, as in your report, they rejected it when the UN had proposed the division plan, but it has been a dreadful journey for them, and especially we have seen in the last 2 years since the dreadful, horrendous attack of the 7th of October, that not only the Israeli government has taken extreme measures, but that Hamas have too, and there's still 48 hostages in Gaza. So there has to be urgent action to end the war now, release the hostages, and pave a path to two states. As I said, it's a long process.
What does this recognition actually mean in practical terms? What changes, if any, follow such a move?
Well, it's a symbolic move, and it's a move that basically is meant to stop Israel annexing parts of the West Bank and Gaza, or to be fair, the extreme government or elements within the extreme government are intent on annexing the entire West Bank and Gaza Strip. So I think that is the reason why the announcement is happening specifically today. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir have stated clearly that their intention is to expel all Palestinians from Gaza, and certainly that looks like it's going to be the case if they stay in power in the West Bank. So it's really an important move to ensure that settlements stop, because settlements have been the main problem in terms of entrenching the occupation.
As you well know, Israel says recognizing a Palestinian state rewards Hamas. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, it's a question of interpretation, and of course, Hamas will claim it as a victory, and I think we have to be honest about that. And it's not, there is no point in denying it. And with all due respect to the three leaders that said that Hamas will not have a role in the future Palestinian government, it is not for them to decide. It is the Palestinian people that are going to elect their own government. And I think it's very clear that whoever they elect, the entire international community, as well, of course, as the Palestinians, will need to respect the outcome of the election. So I think before one makes promises, one needs to really think about it. True, this is part of the plan of the proposed by the Arab League. It's not stated there, the plan for the reconstruction of Gaza. It's not stated there clearly, but if you read very carefully between the 160-page plan, between the lines, it's pretty clear that the intention is to disarm Hamas. But the question really is, who is going to do that? No one is willing to do that, as far as I can see. And Hamas have stated that they will transfer power, certainly civilian power, that means governance of and every other element that isn't security and military, to a technocratic Palestinian government. But there are big questions looming over how to have a peaceful transition. And I just think I see this particular declaration as a call to end the war and pave a path to peace, and to get the Gulf states and the European states and the neighboring states to Israel, namely Egypt and Jordan, together with US backing, to end the war and to pave a path for peace. It's possible, but there is a lot of, we cannot be naive about what needs to happen next in order to ensure that that is indeed the path that is going to be the prevailing one. One more important thing is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated very clearly that he didn't state it in those words, but the interpretation is very clear, that he's not going to allow for the annexation of the West Bank and Gaza to happen until he meets US President Donald Trump later this week. So everything, I think all eyes and everything depends on the outcome of the Trump-Netanyahu meeting. Trump so far has said that he is not going to allow for the annexation. So a lot is going to hinge on whether US President Donald Trump, who really is the only man in the world that can stop the war at the drop of a hat, given the extensive leverage that he holds over Netanyahu. All eyes on that meeting.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there, but many thanks to Nomi Bar-Yaacov, international human rights lawyer at the Geneva Center for Security Policy.
Thank you, Michael.